The ham was still steaming on the table when my mother looked at my 8-year-old daughter and me with eyes devoid of love. She didn't scream. She just whispered, "Leave and never return." I thought it was cruelty, a sudden rejection that shattered our Christmas. I hustled Lily out to the car, blindingly angry, until 5 minutes later, when the rearview mirror filled with smoke and sirens, it wasn't an eviction, it was a desperate head start. The heater in my sedan had been broken since November, and the cold air inside the car felt like a physical weight, pressing against my chest as I navigated the winding roads leading into Warren Cove. Beside me, my 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was asleep, her head lolling against the seatbelt strap, a small line of drool pooling on her pink puffy jacket. I reached over and adjusted the vent, trying to spare her the worst of the draft. But the cold was persistent. It was a fitting atmosphere for my return home. I was 33 years old. Yet driving back to my parents' house made me feel like a teenager again, braced for judgment. It had been a long stretch of distance. Not a feud, exactly, but a slow erosion. Missed calls, short visits, the kind of drifting apart that happens when life gets messy and you do not want to explain the mess to the people who raised you. But this year was supposed to be different. This was the reset. I looked at Lily. She needed this. She needed grandparents who spoiled her, and a Christmas tree that touched the ceiling and the smell of cinnamon and pine. She needed the version of childhood I remembered, not the frantic, schedule-juggling reality I'd been providing for the last 2 years. Warren Cove appeared through the windshield like a memory preserved in amber. The town square was draped in heavy garlands, and the iron street lamps glowed with a soft, buttery light. It was beautiful and quiet. Too quiet. As I turned onto Elm Street, the tires crunched over a layer of hard-packed snow. My parents' house was the third on the left, a sprawling Victorian with blue siding that my father, Martin, had spent half his life repainting. I slowed the car, intending to pull into the driveway, but a black SUV was blocking the entrance. The engine was running, puffing gray exhaust into the frigid air. I stopped on the street, confused. My parents rarely had visitors, especially not on Christmas Eve. The front door of the house opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a heavy wool coat that looked expensive. He turned back to say something to someone inside the doorway, presumably my father, and then walked briskly toward the black SUV as he passed my car. He glanced at me. It was a fleeting look, dismissive and sharp, but what stuck in my mind was his hands. He was wearing leather gloves. Not unusual for winter, but he was adjusting them as if he had just pulled them on, or perhaps as if he had never taken them off while inside the house. He got into the SUV and peeled away without a wave. Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Are we there? Mom? We are here, baby." I forced a brightness into my voice that I did not feel. "Look, Grandma and Grandpa have the lights up." We gathered our bags and walked up the path. The house looked picture-perfect, a wreath with a red velvet bow hung on the door. But when I reached for the handle, the door swung open before I could touch it. My mother, Elaine, stood there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, highlighting the sharp angles of her cheekbones. She was wearing her holiday apron, the one with the embroidered holly, but her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. "Claire." She breathed my name like it was a question. "Merry Christmas, Mom." I smiled, leaning in for a hug. She embraced me, but her body was rigid. There was no softness in it, none of the melting warmth I usually associated with her. She smelled of rosemary and bleach, a strange combination. She pulled back quickly and looked down at Lily. "And here's my big girl. Hello, Lily? Hi, Grandma?" Lily launched herself at Elaine's waist. Elaine patted Lily's back, her eyes darting over my shoulder to the street. "Come inside. Quickly now. It is freezing out there." We stepped into the foyer, and the heat of the house hit me. It was stiflingly hot. The thermostat must have been cranked up to 80 degrees. Martin Butler, my father, emerged from the living room. He held a dish rag in his hands, twisting it over and over. He looked tired. Deep bags hung under his eyes. and his usually neatly trimmed beard was ragged at the edges. "Hey, Dad." I dropped the bags. "Hello." "Claire." He did not move to hug me. Instead, he walked past me to the front window, peering through the sheer curtains. Who was that in the car? Just me and Lily. "Dad." "No. The other car." He did not turn around. "Oh, I don't know. He was leaving when we pulled up." Martin grunted. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty street, before turning back to us with a smile that looked like it had been physically painful to construct. "Well, you are here. That is what matters. Let me take your coats." The house felt odd, not messy, but disturbed. There was a stack of papers on the hallway table that looked like it had been hastily shoved together. A rug in the living room was slightly askew. I followed my mother into the kitchen. The smell of roasting ham was thick in the air, rich and salty. But underneath it, I caught that scent of bleach again. "Need any help?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "No." Elaine was chopping carrots with a speed that made me nervous. "Everything is under control. You just sit. Relax." "Who was the man leaving?" I asked casually. Elaine's knife slipped, hitting the cutting board with a loud crack. She did not look up, just a neighbor, dropping off a donation. He kept his gloves on. I said, I do not know why I said it. It was just a detail that had snagged my attention. Elaine stopped chopping. She stood perfectly still for a second. "It is cold, Claire. People wear gloves." The tone was final. A door slamming shut. I went back to the living room to find Lily showing Martin her new drawing pad. Martin was nodding, making appropriate noises of approval, but his eyes kept drifting back to the window, every time a car drove past outside. His shoulders tensed up toward his ears. "Dad?" I asked gently. "Is everything okay?" "Fine," he said, too loudly. "Everything is fine. Just waiting for the snow." The forecast said snow. It was a lie. I knew my father. He hated snow. He spent every winter complaining about shoveling the walk. Now he was watching for it like a child waiting for Santa Claus? The unease in my gut began to curdle into something heavier. I had come here for peace. I had come here to let my parents fuss over Lily while I drank wine and forgot about my job and my bills. But instead of peace, I had walked into a frequency I could not quite tune into. It felt like walking into a room where two people had just finished screaming at each other. Dinner was served an hour later. The dining room was beautiful. My mother had brought out the good china, the plates with the gold rim that we were forbidden from touching when I was a child. The ham sat in the center of the table, glazed and glistening. Lily was the only source of genuine noise. She chattered happily about second grade, about her friend Sophie who had a dog with 3 legs, about the glitter glue incident in art class. My parents ate mechanically. They cut their meat into tiny squares. They chewed. They swallowed. But they did not taste it. "So," I said, trying to bridge the gap, "I saw the new community center on the way in. It looks impressive." Martin's fork clattered against his plate. "It is a waste of money." Elaine shot him a look, a sharp, warning glare. "Martin, it is," he insisted, though his voice was low. "I heard the Hearthlight Fund paid for most of it." I said, I remembered reading about it online, the local charity that was revitalizing the waterfront. Silence, absolute, heavy silence descended on the table. Lily looked from me to her grandparents, holding a forkful of mashed potatoes halfway to her mouth. "Who runs that again?" I asked, pushing through the awkwardness. "Is it Cal Donovan? I remember seeing his name in the papers." My mother flinched. It was subtle, a slight jerk of her head, but I saw it. Martin put his fork down. He picked up his water glass, his hand trembling so badly that the water sloshed over the rim. "We do not talk about him," Martin said. His voice was strained, like a wire pulled until it snaps. "Why not?" I asked. "Is he—" "Claire." Elaine's voice was sharp. "Enough. We are eating." I looked at them, really looked at them. My father was pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the drafty dining room. My mother looked terrified. Her eyes were wide, and she was breathing shallowly, her chest rising and falling in rapid, short bursts. They exchanged a look, It is hard to describe that look. It was a conversation without words. It was a calculation. I saw my father's eyes plead for something, and I saw my mother's eyes harden with a terrible resolve. It was the look of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump. Lily, oblivious to the undercurrent, swallowed her potatoes. "Grandma, can I have more juice?" Elaine turned to her. She stared at Lily for a long second. The hardness in her face cracked, just for a moment, revealing a well of grief so deep it frightened me. She reached out and touched Lily's cheek. "Of course, sweetie," Elaine whispered. Then she looked at me. The transition was instant. The softness vanished. Her face went blank, like a slate wiped clean. "Claire," she said. "Yes." "Mom, leave." I blinked. "What? Leave?" she repeated. Her voice was flat, monotone. "Leave and never return." I laughed. It was a reflex, a nervous, confused sound. "Mom, what are you talking about? We just got here. We haven't even had dessert." Martin looked up. He locked eyes with me. His face was gray. "Go, Claire. You need to leave. Now. And do not come back. Do not ever come back." The laughter died in my throat. I looked from one to the other. This was not a joke. This was not a prank. "Is this because I mentioned the charity?" I demanded, my confusion turning into a sudden, hot spark of anger. "Are you serious? You are kicking us out on Christmas Eve because I mentioned a name?" "We do not want you here," Elaine said. She stood up. Her movements were jerky. "You are not welcome. Claire, you and your daughter, get out." The words felt like physical slaps. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floorboards. "Fine," I snapped. "If that is how you want to be, I drive 4 hours to see you, to let you see your granddaughter. And you treat us like this?" I looked at Lily. She was shrinking into her chair, her lower lip trembling. She looked terrified. That was what stopped me from screaming. Lily's fear. I took a breath. I looked at my mother again, ready to unleash a torrent of hurt. But then I saw it. Elaine was reaching for Lily's coat, which was draped over the back of the spare chair. Her hand was shaking violently. Her knuckles were white, but the way she picked up the coat, it was tender. She smoothed the fabric. She held it out toward me, not throwing it, but offering it. And her eyes. Her mouth was a hard line of rejection, but her eyes were screaming. They were wide and wet and frantic. They were begging me. "Understand." They seemed to say, "Please, just understand." Martin was gripping the table edge so hard I thought the wood might splinter. He wasn't looking at me with anger. He was looking at the front door. Fear. They were not angry. They were terrified. I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. The anger in my chest evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sharp instinct, the same instinct that makes you freeze when you hear a twig snap in the woods. I needed to get Lily out of here. "Right," I said. My voice was calm, strangely calm. I grabbed my purse. I walked around the table and took Lily's hand. "Come on, Bug." Lily looked up at me, tears spilling over. "Grandma is mad?" "No," I lied smoothly. "No, Grandma isn't mad. We just forgot something." I looked at Elaine. "We forgot the hot cocoa. The special kind. We have to go get it." Elaine nodded. A single, sharp motion. "Yes, go get it." I grabbed Lily's coat from my mother's trembling hands. For a split second, our fingers brushed. Her skin was ice cold. She squeezed my hand, a desperate, crushing pressure, and then let go. "Go," Martin whispered. I did not pack our bags. I did not ask for an explanation. I hustled Lily toward the front door. "Mom, my shoes!" Lily protested as I shoved her feet into her boots without tying them. "We will tie them in the car," I said. I opened the front door. The cold air hit us again, but this time it felt welcome. It felt like an escape. I marched Lily down the walkway, my senses dialed up to 11. The street was empty. The snow was still white and undisturbed under the street lamps. I opened the back door of the car and buckled Lily in. "Why are we rushing?" she asked. "It is a surprise," I said. "A surprise race." I got into the driver's seat. I locked the doors. I started the engine. As I put the car in reverse, I looked back at the house. My parents were standing in the living room window. They were not looking at me. They were looking at each other. My father had his arm around my mother's shoulders. He pulled her close. It looked like a goodbye. I backed out of the driveway, the tires spinning slightly on a patch of ice. I shifted into drive and pressed the gas. Perhaps a little too hard. The car surged forward. I did not look back again until we were at the end of the block. I turned right, heading toward the main road that would take us out of Warren Cove. My heart was hammering against my ribs. What just happened? What in the world just happened? Mom? Lily's voice was small from the back seat. I am hungry still. I know. Baby, we will stop. We will get pancakes, okay? Pancakes for Christmas Eve dinner. I checked the dashboard clock. It had been 5 minutes since we left the driveway. 5 minutes since my mother told me to never return. And then I heard it. It was a sound like a thunderclap, but sharper. A hollow whump that vibrated through the floorboards of the car. I slammed on the brakes. What was that? Lily squeaked. I looked in the rearview mirror, over the tops of the trees, back in the direction of my parents' street. A plume of black smoke was rising. It stained the dark sky, thick and oily. Then came the sirens. They started as a low whine and grew instantly into a deafening wail. 1, then 2, then 3. No, I whispered. I spun the steering wheel, pulling a U-turn right there in the middle of the road. Mom, where are we going? We have to check. I said. I could not keep the panic out of my voice. I drove back. I drove fast. As I turned back onto Elm Street, the air was already hazy. The smell of burning wood and melting plastic hit the car's vents. I could not get close. A police cruiser was already parked sideways across the road. Lights flashing blue and red, painting the snow in a violent disco strobe. I slammed the car into park and jumped out. Mom! Lily screamed. Stay there! I yelled back. Lock the door! I ran toward the blockade. My boots slipped on the icy asphalt. I could see the house, or rather, I could see where the house used to be intact. The front of the Victorian was gone, blown out. Flames were licking up the sides of the blue siding, angry and orange. The roof had partially collapsed on the left side. No, 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 no. I reached the police tape just as an officer stepped in front of me. Ma'am, you have to stay back, he shouted over the roar of the fire. That is my parents' house, I screamed. Martin and Elaine Butler, they are in there. The officer grabbed my shoulders. He was young, his face illuminated by the firelight. We have units responding. You need to stay back for your safety. Let me go. I struggled against him, slipping on the ice. I just left. They were right there. They were in the window. Another vehicle screeched to a halt behind the police cruiser. A black SUV. It looked just like the one I had seen earlier. Firefighters were running toward the structure, hoses dragging behind them like dead snakes. I saw a firefighter walking back from the house. His helmet tucked under his arm. He wasn't rushing. He was walking slowly. I broke away from the young officer and lunged toward the firefighter. My parents. I grabbed his heavy turnout coat. Did you find them? Are they out? The firefighter looked down at me. His face was smeared with soot, but his eyes were clear, blank. He did not look at the burning house. He looked right at me. The structure was fully involved upon arrival. He said, "What?" No one could have survived the initial blast. He recited, "The gas main. It happens in these old houses. Tragic accident." I stared at him. He was speaking in a monotone. He wasn't breathless. He wasn't yelling orders. He was reciting a line. It had been less than 10 minutes. How could he know it was the gas main? How could he declare them dead so fast? They were in the window. I choked out. 5 minutes ago. The firefighter blinked. He stepped back, disengaging from my grip. "Clear the area," he said to the police officer. "Get her out of here." The officer grabbed my arm again. Firmer this time. "Ma'am, please, you have a child in the car. We need to keep the road clear for the trucks." I looked back at the house. The fire was roaring now, consuming the history of my family. The heat was intense on my face. drying the tears before they could fall. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I hit Mom on my speed dial. It rang once, then a click. "Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system." I hung up. I dialed Dad. It didn't even ring. Beep, beep, beep. "The number you have reached is no longer in service." I stared at the screen. No longer in service? That wasn't possible. A phone doesn't go out of service because of a fire. It goes to voicemail. It rings out. It doesn't just cease to exist in the network seconds after an explosion. I looked up at the burning shell of the house, the flames reflected in the windows of the neighboring homes. The words echoed in my head. Leave and never return. They knew. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to bend over, hands on my knees, gasping for the freezing, smoky air. They didn't kick me out because they hated me. They kicked me out because the clock was ticking. I looked back at my car. Lily's face was pressed against the glass of the rear window, her eyes wide with terror. I had to move. I had to get to her. I straightened up. The young officer was watching me, his hand resting on his belt. The firefighter had turned his back and was talking to a man in a suit who had emerged from the black SUV. The man in the suit was not wearing firefighter gear. He was wearing a long wool coat. He turned his head slightly. I froze. I couldn't be sure. The smoke, the flashing lights, the distance. But the profile looked familiar. It looked like the man with the gloves. He nodded to the firefighter, then turned and walked back to the darkness of his vehicle. I backed away, slowly at first, then faster. I turned and ran back to my car. I threw myself into the driver's seat and locked the door. "Mom?" Lily was crying. "Mom, the house is burning." "I know. Baby, I know. Where are Grandma and Grandpa?" I gripped the steering wheel. My knuckles were white. "I do not know." I whispered. I put the car in gear. I had to get away. The police officer was walking toward my car now, waving his flashlight. He wanted to talk. He wanted a statement. I couldn't talk. If I talked, I would scream. And if I screamed, I would never stop. I spun the wheel and drove around the blockade, bumping over the curb, ignoring the officer's shout. I drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to put miles between us and that fire. My parents were gone. The house was gone. And the last thing my father had said to me was a command. Leave. I was leaving. But I knew, with a certainty that sat in my stomach like a stone, that I would not be able to follow the second part of his order. I would return. I looked at the phone on the passenger seat. The screen was dark. I drove into the night, the smell of smoke lingering in the car, clinging to my clothes, marking us. We were alive, but we were alone. The neon sign of the Galaxy Diner buzzed with a sound like a trapped insect, flickering between pink and a dead, dull gray. It was the only place open at 11 o'clock on Christmas Eve, a beacon of grease and caffeine on the edge of the highway, 5 miles from the smoking crater that used to be my childhood home. We sat in a booth upholstered in cracked red vinyl. I had ordered Lily a stack of pancakes with whipped cream and sprinkles, framing it as a midnight feast, a special holiday treat. She was eating them with a slow, confused dedication, her eyes heavy. She was still wearing her coat. I had not taken mine off either. I felt that if I took it off, I would be admitting that we were staying, that we were paused in this nightmare. "Mom," Lily said around a mouthful of syrup, "did Grandma and Grandpa get out?" I gripped my coffee mug with both hands, using the heat to stop the trembling in my fingers. I looked at her. I could not lie to her, but I could not tell her the truth, because I did not know what the truth was. "They are very smart," I said. My voice sounded thin, like paper tearing. "You know how Grandpa is always checking the locks, and Grandma always knows where everything is? They probably got out the back way." Lily nodded, accepting this because she needed to. "Then why didn't they call? Phones break, bug, even grown-up phones." I stood up. "Eat your pancakes. I have to use the restroom. I will be right back." I walked calmly to the back of the diner, past a truck driver hunched over a slice of pie and a waitress who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. I pushed the door to the restroom open, locked it behind me, and then I fell apart. I sank to the tiled floor, my knees hitting the cold ceramic hard. I buried my face in my hands and tried to scream without making a sound. The pressure in my chest was unbearable, a physical expansion of terror and grief that threatened to crack my ribs. I saw the fire again. I saw the black smoke blotting out the stars. I saw my mother's face, rigid and terrified, as she handed me Lily's coat. Leave and never return. It wasn't a rejection, it was a lifeboat. I dry heaved over the toilet for a minute, nothing coming up but bile and the sour taste of fear. I forced myself to stand. I went to the sink and splashed freezing water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was pale, my eyes rimmed with red, and there was a smudge of soot on my jawline, a dark fingerprint of the explosion. I scrubbed it off until my skin was raw. I could not be a daughter right now. I could not be a victim. I had to be a fortress. Lily was sitting 10 feet away, eating pancakes while her world burned down. And she needed me to be solid. I took 3 deep breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. I unlocked the door and walked back out. "Hey," I said, sliding back into the booth. "How are the sprinkles?" "Good," Lily said. She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Your face is wet. Just washed up." I signaled the waitress. "Can we get the check, please?" We spent the night at a motel 3 towns over, a place with thin walls and a smell like stale lemon cleaner. I didn't sleep. I lay in the bed next to Lily, watching the red numbers of the alarm clock change, listening to the sirens that occasionally wailed in the distance, wondering if they were heading to Elm Street at 7 a.m. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it on the first ring, scrambling out of bed and into the bathroom so I wouldn't wake Lily. "This is Claire," I whispered. "Ms. Butler?" "This is Detective Renee Halston, Warren Cove Police Department." I sat on the edge of the bathtub. "Did you find them?" There was a pause that lasted too long. "Ms. Butler, the fire is out, but the structure is unstable. It is going to take some time for the fire marshal and the crime scene unit to process the site." "Process the site?" I repeated. "What does that mean? Are they dead or not?" "We have not recovered any remains at this time," Halston said. Her voice was smooth, professional, and completely detached. "However, given the intensity of the blaze and the time of night, we are operating under the presumption that the occupants were inside." "Presumption," I said. "That is a guess. It is a likelihood based on the evidence." "What evidence?" I demanded, my voice rising. "The firefighter last night said it was a gas main. How did he know that 10 minutes after the explosion?" "He was likely speculating," Halston said. "We are looking into a gas leak. These older homes. The infrastructure is degrading. It is a tragedy. Ms. Butler, a terrible accident." "It wasn't an accident," I said. "My parents told me to leave 5 minutes before the house blew up. They told me to get out and never come back. They knew something was going to happen." "Ms. Butler, people say strange things during the holidays. Stress, family tension. It is easy to reinterpret things in hindsight." I gripped the phone. "Do not patronize me." They were scared. "There was a man there earlier, a man with gloves." "We will take your statement," Halston said, cutting me off. "But right now, for your own safety and the integrity of the investigation, we need you to stay clear of the scene until we clear it." "I am coming there," I said. "I am coming now." I hung up. I dressed Lily in yesterday's clothes. We drove back to Warren Cove in silence. The morning sun was bright and cruel, illuminating the snow with a glare that made my eyes ache. When we turned onto Elm Street, the devastation was shocking. In the daylight, it looked worse than it had in the dark. The house was a black, skeletal husk. The roof had collapsed entirely into the second floor. The front porch was gone. The smell was heavy and wet. Burnt wood, insulation, and the metallic tang of water. There was yellow tape everywhere. A single police cruiser sat idling. I parked the car. "Lily, stay here." I said. "I mean it. Do not open this door." I walked up to the tape. The officer in the cruiser got out. It wasn't the young one from last night. It was an older man with a thick mustache. "You can't go in there, ma'am," he said. But he didn't sound aggressive. He sounded tired. "I am the daughter," I said. "I need to see." He looked at me, then looked at the ruin. "Just stay behind the tape. The floorboards are gone. It is a pit." I walked along the perimeter, my boots crunching on debris that had been blown into the yard, shards of glass, a piece of blue siding, a singed page from a book. I stopped near the side of the house, where the living room had been. The explosion had blown outward, taking the wall with it, but a section of the corner remained standing, charred but upright. It was the corner where my father kept his heavy oak bookshelves. Most of the shelves were gone, turned to ash, but the bottom shelf, shielded perhaps by a fallen beam or just the vagaries of physics, was still there, and on it, black with soot but intact, was the vintage ornament box. It was a sturdy wooden box where my mother kept the glass heirlooms from Germany. It was sitting slightly askew, the lid propped open by a piece of drywall. I looked at the officer. He was back in his car, pouring coffee from a thermos. I ducked under the tape. I know I shouldn't have. I know it was a crime scene, but I wasn't thinking about the law. I was thinking about the fact that my mother loved those ornaments more than she loved the house itself. I scrambled over a pile of wet, blackened wood. I reached the shelf. I opened the box. Most of the glass bulbs were shattered, a sad glitter of red and green dust. But tucked in the corner, wedged tight so it wouldn't move, was the heavy, brass pear. It was an ugly ornament, one I had always made fun of. But it was solid metal. I picked it up. It felt heavy, too heavy. I turned it over. The bottom of the pear, usually sealed, had a piece of electrical tape stuck over it. I peeled the tape back. A small, silver key fell into my palm. Behind the key, jammed into the hollow space of the metal fruit, was a folded scrap of paper. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it into the ash. I unfolded it. It was my mother's handwriting. The loops were tight and hurried, lacking her usual graceful slant. "Claire, safe deposit box key enclosed. The will is in the lawyer's office, but do not trust the draft on file. Pay the heating bill for the rental property. The account number is on the fridge. Be careful with the driveway ice. Leave and never return. Love, Mom." I stared at the note. It wasn't a suicide note. It wasn't a confession. It was a list of chores. It was practical. Pay the heating bill. Watch the ice. But the last line, leave and never return. She had written it down. She had planned this. She had put this note in the ornament before dinner, before I even arrived. The phrase she said at the table wasn't a spontaneous outburst. It was a code, a trigger phrase she knew I would remember because it was so cruel. She used the cruelty to save me. I shoved the key and the note into my bra, the only safe place I could think of. I put the brass pear back in the box and closed the lid. I scrambled back over the debris, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I got back into the car. "Mom?" Lily asked. "You smell like a fireplace." I started the engine. We have an errand to run. Baystone Credit Union was a small, brick building on Main Street, decorated with cheap tinsel. I left Lily in the lobby with a coloring book and a promise of hot chocolate if she stayed in the chair. I walked up to the teller. "I need to access my father's safety deposit box." I said, "I have the key, and I am the co-signer." The teller, a woman named Sharon who had known my parents for 20 years, looked at me with wide, watery eyes. "Oh, Claire," she whispered, "I heard about the fire. I am so sorry. We are all just devastated. Thank you." "Sharon," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I just need to get some papers. For the insurance." Of course. Come right this way." She led me into the vault. It was quiet and smelled of dust and old money. She used her master key, and I inserted the small silver key from the brass pear. The box slid out. I took it to the private viewing room and closed the door. I opened the lid. There were 3 things inside: a black USB flash drive, a cashier's check stub, and a document bound in a blue legal folder. I picked up the check stub first. It was dated yesterday, December 24th. The amount was for $300,000. My parents were comfortable, but they were not rich. $300,000 was everything they had. Their retirement, the equity in the house. I looked at the payee. Candlebridge Holdings. I had never heard of it. I picked up the document. It was a copy of a family trust. I flipped through the pages. It looked standard. Legalese about assets and beneficiaries, until I got to the signature page. Martin Butler, Elaine Butler. The signatures were there, but they looked wrong. My father's signature had a distinct flourish on the B, a loop he had practiced since he was a draftsman in the Navy. This signature lacked the loop. It was shaky, hesitant, and the date next to the signatures was November 15th. I checked the access log on the table. The book where everyone had to sign in to enter the vault. The last entry was from yesterday, December 24th. Martin Butler, 4:30 p.m. I stared at the time. 4:30? At 4:30 yesterday. I was pulling into the driveway. My father was in the house. He was basting the ham. I had seen him through the window as I parked, before the man with the gloves came out. My father could not have been at the bank at 4:30. So who signed the log? I closed the box, taking the contents with me. I shoved the empty box back into the slot when Sharon returned. "Did you find what you needed?" "Hun?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Sharon, was my dad here yesterday?" She frowned, thinking, I didn't see him. I was on break around 4, but the log says he was. Must have been when heavyset Kevin was working the desk. I thanked her and walked out, grabbing Lily's hand. We went back to the car. I needed to call Evan. My brother and I hadn't spoken in 6 months. It wasn't a dramatic falling out, just the friction of two people handling adulthood differently. Evan was always looking for the shortcut, the big break. I was the plotter, the planner. I dialed his number. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Claire? Evan." I said, "Did you hear?" "Yeah," he said. His voice was thick. "Yeah, I heard. The police called me this morning." "Jesus." "Claire, the house is gone?" "It's gone. Evan, Mom and Dad haven't found them." There was a silence on the line, heavy and strange. "They are dead." "Claire," he said finally. "You don't know that." I snapped. "The police said it was a gas explosion. Massive structural failure. There is no way they survived that. Why are you accepting this so easily?" I asked. "Evan, something is wrong. I found a key. I went to the bank. Dad's account is drained. $300,000. Evan, written to a company called Candlebridge. Stop," Evan said. His voice dropped. "What? Stop digging. Just let it be an accident. What are you talking about?" I felt a cold prickle of suspicion. Why would I let it be an accident if it wasn't? "Because you have Lily," he hissed. "You have a daughter to worry about. If it was an accident, it's a tragedy. If it wasn't, then it's dangerous. Do you understand?" "Evan, what do you know?" "I don't know anything. But I spoke to Cal Donovan, okay?" I froze. "You spoke to Cal? When?" "This morning. He called to offer his condolences. He is helping with the arrangements. He said it would be best if we focused on healing, if we didn't complicate the narrative." "Complicate the narrative?" I repeated. "That is corporate speak." "Evan, since when do you listen to corporate speak about our parents' death?" "Since I don't want to end up like them," he shouted. Then he caught himself. The silence that followed was terrifying. "Evan," I whispered, "did you know they were in trouble?" "Just drop it. Claire, take Lily and go home. Go back to the city." He hung up. I stared at the phone. My brother was scared. He wasn't grieving. He was trembling. "Mom?" I turned to look at Lily. She was coloring in her book, a picture of a snowman. She was using a gray crayon for the snow. "Mom, who is Cal?" she asked. My stomach dropped. "Why do you ask that?" "Honey, is he the nice man?" "Which nice man?" "The one in the kitchen," she said, not looking up from her coloring. "When you were in the bathroom yesterday, before dinner, he came in the back door." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had gone to the bathroom for maybe 3 minutes after we arrived, to wash my hands. "He came inside?" I asked. My voice very quiet. Yeah. He had fancy shoes. He looked at the tree. He told Grandma he liked the ornaments. He said they were very fragile. Lily picked up a red crayon. He smiled at me. She added, but it wasn't a real smile. It was a teeth smile. I looked out the window at the passing town. The friendly storefronts. The holiday wreaths. The people walking with their heads down against the cold. Cal Donovan had been in the house. He had threatened my mother in her own kitchen while my daughter watched. Fragile. He wasn't talking about the glass. I started the car. I couldn't stay in this town. Not at a motel where anyone could find us. I drove toward the highway. But instead of leaving, I pulled into a rest stop and dialed a number I knew by heart. Janelle Price answered on the first ring. Hello? Janelle, I said. It's Claire. Claire! Oh my God. I saw the news. Are you okay? Where are you? I am not okay, I said. Janelle, listen to me. My parents didn't just die in a fire. They were erased. Slow down, Janelle said. Her voice switched instantly from friend to journalist. Tell me everything. I told her. I told her about the phrase, the man with the gloves, the key in the pear, the empty bank account, the logbook signature that couldn't be real. Evan's fear. And Lily seeing Cal Donovan in the kitchen. Hearthlight. Janelle said when I finished, the charity. Yes. Claire, listen to me carefully. I have been working on a piece about gentrification in the coastal counties. I have heard whispers about Hearthlight. They are not just a charity. They are a land acquisition shark. They target distressed properties, or properties they make distressed. Make distressed? They use legal bullying, code violations, liens, predatory lending. If your parents wrote a check to Candlebridge, that is a shell company. I guarantee it. I looked at the flash drive sitting in the cup holder. I have files. Janelle, I found a drive. Do not open it on your phone, she said, and do not use your laptop if it is connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. I am scared. Janelle, good, she said. You should be. If they blew up a house to cover their tracks, they are not playing games. You need to get off the grid. Do not go back to your apartment. Do not stay at the motel. Where do I go? There is a short-term rental on the north side of the lake, near the old cannery. It is strictly cash, usually for fishermen. I know the owner. I will call him. Go there. Okay. And Claire? Yeah? Document everything. Every call. Every time. Every name. If this is what I think it is, the police are either useless or involved. You are not a victim anymore. Claire, you are a witness. I hung up. I looked at Lily. She had fallen asleep against the window, her coloring book sliding to the floor. I reached over and locked her door. Then I locked mine. I opened the glove compartment and took out a small notebook and a pen. 1. The phrase, leave and never return. 2. The note, pay the heating bill. 3. The bank, 4:30 p.m. signature, impossible. 4. The money, $300,000 to Candlebridge. 5. Cal Donovan, in the kitchen. Fragile. I stared at the list. It looked like the plot of a bad movie, but the smell of smoke was still in my hair, and my parents were gone. This wasn't an accident. It was choreography. I put the car in drive. We weren't leaving. We were just moving to a different trench. The fisherman's rental was a drafty A-frame cabin perched on the edge of the lake, smelling permanently of damp cedar and wood smoke. It was a place for summer tourists, not a shelter for a woman and her child, hiding from a reality that had shattered just 48 hours ago. I sat at the scratched pine table, the only light coming from the screen of my laptop. Lily was asleep in the loft above, her breathing a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the wind rattling the single-pane windows. I had taped over the laptop's camera. I had disabled the Wi-Fi. I felt paranoid, bordering on hysterical. But then I would remember the smell of the smoke on Elm Street, and the paranoia would harden into cold necessity. I inserted the flash drive I had retrieved from the safety deposit box. The folder structure was neat, meticulously organized. My father was an engineer by trade, a man who found comfort in order, seeing his digital handwriting, folders labeled tax_2023, house_deed, medical, made my throat tighten. But there was a folder at the bottom of the list that didn't fit. It was labeled simply H_compliance. I opened it. It wasn't personal photos or letters. It was a collection of scanned documents, hundreds of them. I clicked on the first file. It was a property transfer deed for a house on Oak Street, a few blocks from where I grew up. I recognized the name of the owner, Mrs. Gable. She was a widow who used to bake cookies for the neighborhood block party. The deed showed she had transferred her property to an entity called Candlebridge Holdings for a sum that was laughably low, $10 and other valuable consideration. I clicked the next file, another deed, the Miller family, transferred to Candlebridge. Then came the spreadsheets. My father hadn't just scanned these, he had analyzed them. He had built a ledger tracking the dates of transfer against dates of hearthlight intervention. The pattern was stark. Column A, homeowner applies for hearthlight heating assistance. Column B, hearthlight conducts home safety audit. Column C, major code violations found. Column D, bridge loan issued by Hearthlight. Column E, title transfer to Candlebridge Holdings. And then, the column that made my blood run cold. Column F was labeled status. The entries varied. Some said resolved. Some said in process. But next to about a dozen names, including the Millers and Mrs. Gable, was a tag in red text. High compliance. I stared at the words. High compliance. It sounded like they were talking about lab rats or prisoners. It suggested a person who rolled over, who signed the papers without reading the fine print, who didn't ask questions when the charity took their home. And at the very bottom of the list, added recently, was a new entry. Butler, Martin Elaine. The status cell was empty. My phone buzzed on the table, startling me so badly I nearly knocked over my water glass. It was Janelle. I picked up. "Tell me you are looking at this." I said, "I am," Janelle said. Her voice was tinny through the burner phone I had bought at a gas station earlier that day. "Claire, this is not just a scam. This is a harvesting operation. Explain it to me." I said, "I am looking at Mrs. Gable's house. Why would she sell for $10? She didn't." Janelle said, "Look at the debt schedule in the subfolder." I clicked where she directed. It wasn't a sale. Janelle continued, "It is a deed in lieu of foreclosure. Hearthlight offers these bridge loans to people who are struggling, usually older folks, asset-rich but cash-poor. The terms look great on the front page. 0 interest for the first year, but the fine print is a bear trap. It triggers a balloon payment if the property fails a continuous maintenance standard determined by their own inspectors. They fail the house on purpose." I realized, exactly. They find a code violation, the loan defaults, and instead of dragging it through public court, the contract has a clause for a quiet transfer to the holding company, Candlebridge, and Hearthlight keeps its hands clean. I whispered, "They get to play the heroes," Janelle said, disgust dripping from her voice. "They step in to relieve the burden of the homeowner. They take the house, paint it gray, and flip it or rent it out. And the family just vanishes into an apartment complex somewhere, too ashamed to tell anyone they lost the family estate to a charity." I looked at the empty status box next to my parents' names. They didn't comply. I said, "No," Janelle said softly. "They didn't. Your dad was an engineer. Claire, he read the fine print. He started tracking them, and that is why the house blew up. Claire, you need to be careful." Janelle's voice was sharp. If your dad was building a case, he was a threat to a multi-million-dollar pipeline. This isn't just about one house. This is the whole county. I hung up. I sat in the dark cabin, the wind howling outside. I looked at the screen. My father had been fighting a war I didn't even know existed. He had been compiling evidence while I was dodging his calls, too busy with my own life to ask why he sounded so tired. The next morning, the sky was the color of a bruise, purple and gray and swollen with snow. I had an appointment with Maris Venn. She had been recommended to me by the funeral director, of all people. When I called to ask about the procedure for a memorial service without bodies, "You need to settle the estate quickly," he had said. "Maris is the best in town. She handles everything with such grace. Her office was in a renovated brownstone near the marina. It smelled of expensive vanilla candles and old leather. There was no clutter, no stacks of files, just a sleek glass desk and a view of the gray water. Maris Venn was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of marble. She was 60, perhaps, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and a suit that cost more than my car. She did not rise when I entered. She gestured to a low, comfortable chair. "Claire," she said. Her voice was warm, enveloping, like a heavy blanket. I was heartbroken to hear about Martin and Elaine. They were pillars of this community. I sat down. I felt underdressed in my jeans and heavy sweater. "Thank you. I understand you are looking to expedite the probate process," she said, opening a slim file on her desk. "Given the tragic nature of the accident and the lack of remains, it can be complicated, but I have relationships with the county judges. We can have the declaration of death issued within the week. That seems very fast," I said. "We want to help you heal." "Claire," Maris smiled. It was a perfect smile, practiced, dragging this out, waiting for forensic reports that will likely be inconclusive. "It just extends the trauma. We want to get you access to the insurance funds and the estate so you can provide for that sweet little girl of yours." I hadn't mentioned Lily. I shifted in the chair. "Actually, I have some questions about the estate. Of course, I found some documents," I said. I watched her face carefully. My father seemed to have transferred a significant amount of money to a company called Candlebridge Holdings shortly before the fire. And there was a bridge loan involved. Maris Venn didn't blink. Her expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. "Martin was a proud man," she said smoothly. "He had some financial entanglements he was trying to resolve. It is not uncommon for seniors to overextend themselves. Trying to maintain those big old houses, he wasn't overextended." I said, "He was meticulous, and the signature on the bank log doesn't match his." Maris clasped her hands on the desk. Her nails were manicured in a soft, neutral pink. "Claire," she said, her voice dropping into a register that sounded like a scolding teacher. "Grief does strange things to the mind. It makes us look for villains because accidents are too senseless to accept. It wasn't an accident," I said. Maris sighed. She opened a drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This is a draft of a settlement agreement," she said. "The Hearthlight Fund has a compassionate relief program for families affected by tragedy in the community. They are prepared to offer a substantial grant to help you rebuild. It would cover the loss of the house, the personal contents, and provide a trust for your daughter." I stared at the paper. Why would a charity pay me for my parents' house burning down? Because they care about Warren Cove. Maris slid the paper toward me. "It is a generous offer. Claire, 7 figures, but it comes with a standard non-disclosure agreement to protect the privacy of the other families they help." I looked at the number. It was enough to change my life. It was enough to send Lily to any college she wanted. It was hush money. "And if I don't sign?" Maris closed the file. "Then you are facing a years-long probate battle. The insurance company will investigate the gas leak theory, and they will find reasons to deny the claim. You will be tied up in litigation while your parents' accounts are frozen. You will be bankrupt, Claire. And for what? To prove that your father made some bad business decisions?" I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my anger was a hot, stabilizing rod in my spine. "Who represents Candlebridge Holdings?" I asked. Maris looked up at me. Her eyes were like flat, gray stones. "I do," she said. The admission was so brazen it took my breath away. "You represent the company that took their money, and you are advising me on their estate? That is a conflict of interest. It is a small town. Claire, we all wear many hats." I walked to the door. "I am not signing anything." Maris didn't move. "Think about your daughter." She called after me. "Think about what is best for her safety. Stability is expensive." "Claire," I slammed the door. I walked back to my car. My breath pluming in the cold air. My hands were trembling. They weren't just covering it up. They were trying to buy me. And the fact that Maris admitted her connection to Candlebridge meant she didn't fear me. She thought I was powerless. I needed to talk to Detective Halston. I needed to tell her about the bribe. I drove to the police station, a brick building that looked like a fortress. I asked for Halston at the front desk. She came out into the lobby 10 minutes later. She looked annoyed. "Ms. Butler," she said, "I told you I would call you with updates. I just came from Maris Venn's office," I said, keeping my voice low so the desk sergeant wouldn't hear. "She offered me money, a settlement from Hearthlight. She admitted she works for Candlebridge." Halston's face tightened. She took my elbow and steered me toward the corner of the lobby. Away from the ears of the other officers. "Did you take it?" she asked. "No," I pulled my arm away. "It is a bribe. Detective, they are trying to pay me to stop asking questions. That proves they are hiding something. It proves they have good lawyers," Halston said. Her voice was hard. "Listen to me. Claire, you are walking around town, kicking over rocks, making accusations against respected people who steal houses. Lower your voice." Halston hissed. "You are interfering with an active investigation. If you continue to harass witnesses or obstruct the process, I will have to take steps." "Take steps?" I stared at her. "Are you threatening me?" "I am warning you." Halston leaned in close. Her eyes were tired, but there was a flicker of something else in them. Fear? Or just resignation? "You are a single mother with no resources in a town that operates on relationships. You are making yourself a target. Go back to the city. Claire, let us handle this. You aren't handling it." I said, "You are burying it." I walked out of the station. The wind hit me again. I felt completely exposed. The law wasn't on my side. The law was just another line on the spreadsheet. I went back to the rental. I needed to regroup. I needed to see Lily. She was sitting on the floor of the cabin, surrounded by her crayons. She looked up and smiled when I came in, innocent and oblivious. "Mom, look," she said. I made a picture of the Christmas table. Before the bad thing happened, I forced a smile. "That is beautiful." "Bug." I went to the kitchen area to pour myself a glass of water. On the counter, amidst the pile of papers I had printed from the flash drive, was a bank statement I hadn't looked closely at yet. It was from a separate account, a checking account I didn't recognize. I picked it up. Payee: Warren Cove, Future Scholars. Amount: $500. Frequency: monthly. I frowned. I had never signed Lily up for a local scholarship fund. We lived 3 hours away. I scanned the dates. They had been paying this for 5 years. Since Lily was 3, I logged into the laptop and searched for Warren Cove Future Scholars. The website was slick. Smiling kids, graduation caps. And there, on the board of directors page, was the list of names. Cal Donovan. President, Maris Venn. Secretary. My parents hadn't just been paying a bill. They had been paying a tribute. They had been paying Cal Donovan $500 a month for 5 years. Why? Protection? A fee to keep their name off the high compliance list? And they had labeled it Future Scholars to hide it from me, to make it look like love instead of extortion. Tears pricked my eyes. They had been living in fear for years. They had been managing a monster, feeding it scraps of their income, trying to keep it away from their door. And I had been annoyed that they didn't visit enough. I had been frustrated by their awkward phone calls. They were protecting me. They were keeping the monster in Warren Cove so it wouldn't follow me to the city. My phone rang again. It was Evan. "We need to talk," he said. "I am not in the mood for games." "Evan, I am at the marina," he said. "Meet me at the pier." "Alone." I hesitated, but I needed answers. I left Lily with the neighbor, a kind older woman named Mrs. Higgins, who lived in the cabin next door and spent her days knitting lobster trap nets. I told her I would be back in an hour. The marina was desolate in the winter. The boats were all dry docked, covered in white shrink wrap that looked like shrouds. Evan was standing at the end of a long wooden pier, staring down at the gray, churning water. He looked terrible. His face was unshaven, his eyes bloodshot. He was shivering, but his coat was unzipped. I walked up to him. "Talk," I said. I took the money. He said. He didn't look at me. What money? The loan. From Hearthlight. I stared at his profile. What are you talking about? 6 months ago. He said, my business. I made some bad bets on inventory. I was going to lose everything. Cal came to me. He said he could help. He offered a bridge loan. Low interest, no credit check, and you took it. I said, I thought I could pay it back, Evan shouted, his voice cracking. But the terms, they changed. Suddenly I owed double. They were going to take my house. Claire, my shop. So you went to Dad. I realized. Evan nodded. He wiped his nose with his sleeve. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But Cal said, he said if I didn't pay, he would go after the family trust. He said he had a lien on Dad's house because of some old clause. He lied. I said, I didn't know that. Evan turned to me. He was crying. Dad tried to fix it. He went to see Cal. He said he would handle it. He told me to stay out of it. He said he had a plan to get us all out. $300,000. I said, that is what was missing from the account. Dad paid off your debt. He tried. Evan sobbed. He tried to buy us out. But Cal, he doesn't just want the money. Claire, he wants the leverage. He wants the properties. Is that why the house blew up? I asked. My voice was deadly calm. Because Dad paid him and then threatened to expose him? I don't know. Evan grabbed my shoulders. His grip was painful. Claire, you have to stop. If Cal knows you have that drive, if he knows what you know, he already knows. I said, Maris Venn knows. They are all in it together. Evan let go of me. He looked terrified. He backed away. I can't be seen with you, he whispered. I have a family. Claire, I can't do this. You are a coward. I said, I am alive, he shouted back. And Mom and Dad aren't. Doesn't that tell you anything? He turned and ran back down the pier, his footsteps hollow on the wood. I watched him go. I felt a cold, hard knot in my stomach. My brother was broken. He had sold our parents out to save his own skin, and now he was drowning in the guilt. But he had given me a piece of the puzzle, the timeline. This had started 6 months ago. The high compliance tag on the spreadsheet wasn't just about the house, it was about Evan. My parents were compliant because Cal had a gun to their son's head. That evening, there was a town hall meeting at the community center. I shouldn't have gone. It was risky, but I needed to see him. I needed to see the face of the man who had destroyed my family. I wore a hat pulled low and a scarf wrapped around my face. I stood in the back of the auditorium. The room was packed. People were drinking hot cider and eating cookies. There was a buzz of excitement. Then Cal Donovan took the stage. He was handsome in a rugged, accessible way. He wore a flannel shirt under a blazer. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a neighbor. Thank you all for coming, he said. His voice was rich and warm, projected effortlessly without a microphone. He spoke about community. He spoke about resilience. He spoke about the tragic fire on Elm Street. Pausing for a moment of silence that felt like a physical violation to me. Martin and Elaine were the heart of this town, he said, bowing his head, and their loss reminds us that we must hold our loved ones close. It reminds us that safety is a community effort. The crowd murmured in agreement. I looked around. I saw faces I knew. My old gym teacher, the owner of the bakery, the librarian. They were all nodding. They were drinking it in. That is why the Hearthlight Fund is launching a new initiative tonight. Cal continued, the Secure Home program. We will be offering free safety inspections to every home in Warren Cove to ensure that a tragedy like this never happens again. Applause broke out. Genuine, enthusiastic applause. I felt sick. He was using my parents' murder to sell the very mechanism he used to steal homes. The safety inspection was the entry point. It was how they found the code violations. It was how they planted the hook. He was expanding the net, and the fish were clapping for him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run up on stage and tear the mask off him. I wanted to hold up the spreadsheet and shout, "He is eating you. He is eating all of you. But I didn't, because I looked at the front row. Sitting there, clapping politely, was Detective Halston, and next to her was Maris Venn. They were the wall, and I was just one woman with a flash drive and a terrifying story. If I screamed now, I wouldn't be a hero. I would be the crazy, grief-stricken daughter who lost her mind. They would escort me out gently, they would pity me, and then they would silence me. I slipped out the back door before the applause died down. I drove back to the cabin in a daze. The isolation was crushing. It wasn't just that they were powerful, it was that they were beloved. They had woven themselves into the fabric of the town so tightly that tearing them out would destroy the town itself. I walked into the cabin. Lily was awake. She was sitting at the table, finishing her drawing. "Mom, you were gone a long time," she said. "I know. Baby, I am sorry." She held up the paper. "Is it good?" I looked at the drawing. It was crude, drawn with the heavy hand of an 8-year-old. But the details were there. The ham, the green beans, Grandpa looking at the window, Grandma looking sad, and in the corner, standing by the kitchen door, she had drawn a man, a stick figure in a suit, and on his hand, she had drawn a big yellow circle. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the circle. "That is his ring," Lily said. "The bird ring." "Bird ring?" "Yeah, it had a bird on it, like a hawk. He was tapping it on the counter when he talked to Grandma." Click, click, click. I stared at the drawing. A hawk crest. I ran to my bag. I pulled out the folder of documents I had taken from the bank. I flipped to the deed for the Miller house, the old one, the original transfer from the 1920s. At the bottom, next to the notary stamp, was an old-fashioned wax seal. It was faded, cracked red wax, but the impression was clear. It was a crest, a hawk gripping a key in its talons. I looked back at Lily's drawing. Cal Donovan wore the seal of the holding company on his finger. He wasn't just the manager, he wasn't just the face, he was the lineage. This wasn't a modern scam, this was an inheritance. Candlebridge Holdings wasn't a shell company created last week. It was the old money of Warren Cove, feeding on the new. And then, a thought hit me like a physical blow. The phrase, "leave and never return." My mother hadn't just said it to get me out of the house. She hadn't just said it to save me from the explosion. She said it because Cal had been in the kitchen. He had been there earlier, but why the urgency at dinner? Why the sudden, terrifying shift? Because they saw him coming back. My father kept checking the window. Not for snow. He was watching for the black SUV. The man I saw leaving. The man with the gloves. He wasn't leaving after a visit. He was leaving after setting the timer. Or, no. My breath hitched. The man I saw leaving had looked at me. He had adjusted his gloves. If Cal was in the kitchen earlier, then who was the man in the driveway at 4:30? The man in the driveway was the executioner, but my parents were still alive when I walked in. They were terrified. They were waiting. They knew they were dead. They knew the house was rigged. That look they exchanged at the table. The silent math. They weren't deciding whether to tell me the truth. They were calculating how much time was left on the clock. They sacrificed themselves. They sat at that table, eating ham, knowing the fuse was burning, just to keep me calm enough to get Lily out without a panic. If I had panicked, if I had refused to leave, we all would have died. So they broke my heart to save my life. Leave and never return wasn't a warning about the town. It was a command to clear the blast zone. I dropped the paper. I looked at Lily. "We are not safe here," I whispered. The cabin was too close. The town was too small. But as I reached for my car keys, I stopped. Running hadn't worked for Mrs. Gable. It hadn't worked for the Millers. It hadn't worked for my parents. If I left now, I would be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Cal Donovan had my brother. He had the police. He had the courts. I couldn't leave. I had to stay. I had to burn it down. I looked at the flash drive. I looked at the drawing. I picked up the burner phone and dialed Janelle. "Do not publish the story yet," I said when she answered. "Why?" "Claire, we have enough to start asking questions. Questions aren't enough." I said. My voice was cold, hard. I felt a transformation completing in my chest. The grief was still there, but it had crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. I don't want to expose a scandal. Janelle, I want to destroy the network. I stood at the counter of the county clerk's office, the fluorescent lights humming overhead with a sound that drilled into my temples. The clerk, a woman named Brenda who wore a sweater emblazoned with snowmen, pushed a folder back across the marble countertop toward me. "I am sorry, Ms. Butler," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "We cannot process your petition for temporary executorship. There is already a filing on record regarding the property transfer." I blinked, the exhaustion behind my eyes pulsing. "What are you talking about? My parents are missing, presumed dead. I am the only heir. I am filing to stop any seizure of assets until the investigation is complete." Brenda tapped a long, red fingernail on the document. "The property was transferred on December 10th. The deed was recorded yesterday morning. It is a done deal. The title belongs to Candlebridge Holdings." I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my hands cold and numb. December 10th? That is 2 weeks ago. My parents were living there. We were eating dinner there on Christmas Eve. "Life estate clause," Brenda recited, as if she had said it 100 times before. "The previous owners retain right of occupancy until a specified date or event. It is all standard." "Show me," I said. My voice was low. "Dangerous. Show me the signature." She sighed, clearly annoyed by my refusal to simply evaporate. But she turned to her computer and printed a copy of the deed. She slid it across the counter. I looked at the bottom of the page. Martin Butler, Elaine Butler. The ink was black. The loops were familiar, to a casual observer, to a tired clerk, to a judge skimming a docket. They were my parents' names. But I knew signatures. I knew the muscle memory of a hand that has signed a name 10,000 times. My mother always lifted her pen slightly between the E and the L in Elaine. A microscopic hesitation. This signature flowed without a break. It was too smooth. It was a digital tracing, or a very good forgery done by a hand that did not know the rhythm of the woman it was mimicking. And my father's signature, the T in Martin, was crossed with a sharp, upward slash. This cross was flat, lazy. "They are fakes," I whispered. Brenda shrugged. "It is notarized, Ms. Butler. See the stamp?" I looked at the stamp. "Commission expires, 2026. "I know how this works," I said, looking up at Brenda. "I know that you can buy a notary stamp online. I know that you can lift a signature from a check and photocopy it onto a deed. This is fraud." Brenda pulled the paper back. "If you want to contest the validity of the deed, you need to file a civil suit. That is a different department. Down the hall, room 302. Next." I walked away from the counter, my legs feeling like they were moving through deep water. I wasn't just fighting a person. I was fighting a system that had been lubricated to slide right over the truth. I went back to the car. The heater rattled as I started the engine. I needed to talk to Janelle. I drove to a park on the edge of town, a place where the trees were thick enough to block the view from the road. I dialed her number on the burner phone. They filed a transfer. I said, "Backdated to December 10th. They claim my parents sold the house weeks ago." Janelle swore softly. "I told you. They are fast. I have been digging into the court archives. Claire, the ones they didn't digitize yet. The basement stuff. What did you find?" "Patterns." She said, "I found 5 lawsuits against Hearthlight or its subsidiaries in the last 10 years, all of them for wrongful foreclosure or predatory lending. Why didn't I see this in the news? Because none of them went to trial." Janelle said, "They were all withdrawn, dismissed with prejudice, which usually means a settlement was reached. I tracked down one of the plaintiffs, a guy named Arthur Silva. He used to own a landscaping business in the valley. Did he talk to you?" "Barely. He is terrified. Claire, he lives in a trailer park 3 counties over now. He told me that he tried to fight them when they called in his loan. He said the next day, his trucks were vandalized, then his dog disappeared, then the building inspector condemned his garage. I gripped the steering wheel. Intimidation. He said something that stuck with me." Janelle continued, I asked him why he didn't go to the press. He said, "They don't ruin you loudly. They ruin you politely. They use the rules until you drown in them." Polite ruin. I repeated. That was Maris Ven. That was the sympathy. The settlement offer. The gentle suggestion that I was the one causing trouble. "Claire," Janelle said, her voice dropping. "Silva said he had a list of other families. He said he gave it to a man a few months ago, a man who promised to help." "Who?" He didn't know the name, but he said the man was an engineer. Older guy, drove a blue sedan. My breath hitched. My father. Dad was building a class action. I whispered, "That is why he was collecting the data. You need to find his raw files." "Claire, the scans on the flash drive are good, but we need the originals. We need his notes. Did you check the whole house?" I checked the box in the living room. I said, "But the house is a ruin. Think, Claire. Your dad was an engineer. He built things to last. If he had a master list, where would he put it? Somewhere the fire wouldn't touch. Somewhere structural." I closed my eyes. I thought about the house. I thought about my father's obsession with joinery, with hidden spaces. When I was a kid, he built me a desk with a secret drawer for my diary. He showed me how to use a magnet to unlock the latch, the bookshelf, the corner that survived. It wasn't just a bookshelf. It was a load-bearing column he had wrapped in oak. "I have to go back," I said. "Claire, it is a crime scene. I have to go back." I waited until dusk. The police cruiser was still parked on Elm Street, but the officer inside was looking at his phone, the blue light illuminating his bored face. I parked 2 streets over, in the driveway of an empty summer rental. I moved through the backyards, climbing over fences, my boots sinking into the snow. I felt like a criminal in the town where I learned to ride a bike. I reached the backyard of my parents' house. The smell of char was still strong, a wet, acrid stench that coated the back of my throat. The yellow tape fluttered in the wind like a festive garland for a funeral. I crouched behind the remains of the garden shed. I watched the officer. He didn't move. I slipped under the tape. I crawled over the debris, the ash staining my jeans black. I made my way to the standing corner of the living room. The darkness was my friend now. I ran my hands over the charred wood of the bookshelf frame. I felt for the seam. My father had shown me once, years ago, how he hid the bolts that anchored the shelf to the studs. "You push here," he had said, "and the pressure releases the catch." I pushed on a knot in the wood, about knee height. Nothing happened. I pushed harder, digging my thumb into the charred surface until I felt the wood give. There was a soft click. A section of the molding, about 6 inches long, popped out. It wasn't a drawer. It was a hollow space routed into the beam itself. I reached inside. My fingers brushed against something smooth and cool. A heavy envelope. I pulled it out. It was a thick, waterproof pouch, the kind you use for kayaking. I shoved it inside my jacket and scrambled backward, away from the house, back into the shadows. I didn't stop moving until I was back in my car. Doors locked, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I drove back to the cabin. I didn't open the pouch until I was inside. With the curtains drawn and a chair wedged under the doorknob, I opened the pouch. Inside was a second flash drive, smaller than the first, and a handwritten list on graph paper. The list was titled Target Acquisitions, Q4. There were 20 names. 12 of them were crossed out with a heavy black marker. My parents' names were at the bottom. They weren't crossed out. They were circled in red. And next to their names, in my father's handwriting, was a date. Deadline, December 25th. The deadline wasn't for the loan. The deadline was for them. I plugged the second flash drive into the laptop. This wasn't just deeds. This was correspondence. Emails my father had somehow intercepted or been given. I opened a file labeled network_map. It was a diagram. In the center was Candlebridge Holdings. Radiating out from it were other names I didn't recognize. North Shore Relief, Valley Hope Initiative, Beacon Housing Group. They were all charities. They were all nonprofits with beautiful, hopeful names, and they were all funneling assets into the same dark hole, This wasn't just Cal Donovan and a few greedy lawyers in Warren Cove. This was a regional machine, a vacuum cleaner sucking up equity from distressed families across 3 states. I felt a wave of vertigo. My father hadn't just stumbled onto a local scam. He had mapped a hydra. My phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at it. It could be anyone. It could be Cal. I answered, but I didn't speak. Claire Butler? A woman's voice asked. Clear, authoritative, but not aggressive. Who is this? My name is Agent Talia Moreno. I am with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. I almost dropped the phone. The FBI? I am listening. I said, I believe you have something that belongs to an investigation I have been trying to open for 2 years. She said, How did you get this number? I am a federal agent, Ms. Butler. Finding people is the easy part. Keeping them alive is the hard part. I shivered. Are you threatening me? No, I am validating you. Your father contacted my office 3 weeks ago. He sent us a sample of what he found. We were arranging a secure drop for the full drive. What happened? I whispered. He went dark. Moreno said. He stopped answering his secure line on the 23rd. We assumed he got cold feet. Then I saw the news about the fire. You let him die. I said, the anger rising in my throat like bile. You knew he was in danger and you let him wait until Christmas? We didn't know the timeline. She said, her voice softening slightly. We didn't know they would move that fast. These groups usually prefer legal pressure. Explosions attract attention. They made a mistake. Claire, they panicked. I looked at the graph paper. Deadline, December 25th. They didn't panic. I said, they were on a schedule. I need to see you. Moreno said, not at the police station, not at your rental. Do you know the scenic overlook on Route 9? The one past the reservoir? Yes. Meet me there in 1 hour. Come alone. And bring the drive. I hung up. I looked at Lily. She was sleeping in the loft. Her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. I couldn't leave her alone. Not again. I woke her up gently. Hey, Bug, we are going on a little adventure. At night? She rubbed her eyes. Yeah, we are going to look at the stars. I drove to the overlook. It was deserted. A gravel patch on the side of the mountain looking down over the black water of the reservoir. A dark sedan was parked there. A woman was leaning against the hood, smoking a cigarette. She flicked it away when I pulled up. I told Lily to stay in the car with the doors locked. I walked over to the woman. Agent Moreno was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp features and a heavy coat. She showed me her badge before I asked. Where's the drive? She asked. I didn't bring it. I lied. I hid it. Smart, she said. She looked me up and down. You look like your mother. You knew her? I spoke to her once. She was the one who called initially. Your father was the data guy. But your mother was the nerve. She was the one who realized that they weren't just stealing houses. They were stealing legacies. I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest. My mother, the woman who baked cookies and worried about drafts. She was the whistleblower. Why didn't they leave? I asked. Why didn't they just run? Because of you. Moreno said, Me? They found out that Candlebridge had flagged you. I stared at her. What? Moreno pulled a folded paper from her pocket. It was a photocopy of an email. Subject: Compliance Leverage / Butler. Daughter works in logistics. Single mother. Vulnerable. If parents do not settle. Initiate credit sabotage on C. Butler. Contact CPS regarding living conditions. I read the words, and the world tilted. They were going to come after me. They were going to take Lily. My parents stayed to fight because if they ran, the monster would have turned its head toward me. They were trying to kill it before it could smell me. They were protecting us. I whispered. And they paid the price, Moreno said. But now you have the evidence they died for. Give it to me. Claire, I can put you in protective custody. I can bring the full weight of the DOJ down on these people. I looked at Moreno. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hand over the pouch and crawl into a hole and let the government fix it. But then I remembered the police officer guarding the ruins. I remembered Maris Ven's calm voice offering me a bribe. I remembered the firefighter reciting his lines. How do I know you can stop them? I asked. If they are regional, If they are this big, how do I know you aren't just another part of the cleanup crew? Moreno smiled. A grim, tight expression. You don't. That is the nature of the beast. But I am the only one standing here without a Hearthlight check in my pocket. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the flash drive. Not the new one. The first one. The one with the scanned deeds. This is part of it. I said, I will give you the rest when I see arrests. Moreno took the drive. She didn't argue. She nodded. Keep your head down. Claire. And get a lawyer. A real one. Not from this town. She got into her car and drove away. I got back into my car. Lily was awake, watching me. Who was that lady? A friend of Grandpa's. I said, I drove back to the cabin, my mind racing. I had given Moreno enough to start, but I had kept the map. I had kept the list, because I realized something standing on that cliff. Moreno wanted to build a case. That takes years. I didn't have years. I had days before they realized I wasn't just a grieving daughter. I needed to break Evan. I called him the next morning. I didn't ask to meet. I told him I was coming to his shop. Evan ran a small marine supply store near the docks. It was empty when I walked in. He looked up from the counter, his face pale. Claire, you shouldn't be here. I locked the door behind me and flipped the sign to closed. I know about the deadline, Evan. He froze. I know about December 25th. I found Dad's list. Evan slumped against the counter. He looked like a puppet with the strings cut. They told him. Evan whispered. They told him if he didn't sign over the deed by Christmas Day, they would release the information about my loan. They would frame me for fraud. So he was going to sign? No, he was going to pay them. He liquidated everything. He was going to pay off my loan and tell them to go to hell. But they didn't want the money. I said, no. Evan shook his head. They wanted the house. It is on the corner lot. Claire. They need it for the new development access road. If they didn't get the Butler house, the whole project failed, so they killed them. Evan put his head in his hands. I killed them. If I hadn't taken that money, you didn't light the fuse. Evan, stop pitying yourself. I need you to do something. I can't go against Cal. You don't have to go against him. You have to work with him. Evan looked up. Confused. What? I need you to tell Cal that I'm breaking, that I'm scared, that I want to sign the settlement and leave. Why? Because I need him in the room. I said, I need him to bring the paperwork. I need him to think he has won. Evan stared at me. You are going to trap him? I am going to finish what Mom and Dad started. Are you with me? Or are you going to let their murderers pave over our home? Evan took a deep breath. He looked at a photo of our parents tacked to the wall behind the register. Tell me what to say. I left Evan's shop and went to pick up Lily from the neighbors. I took her to the small playground near the lake. It was cold, but the sun was out. I pushed her on the swing, higher. She screamed, laughing. I pushed her, watching her fly up toward the gray sky. She was resilient. She was strong, but she was fragile. 2. I stopped the swing. Lily, look at me. She looked at me. Cheeks flushed pink. We need to have a new rule. I said, the feelings rule. What is that? It means that even when things are scary, or when I am busy, you are allowed to ask me anything. You don't have to be quiet to help Mommy, okay? If you are scared, you tell me. If you have a question, you ask. Okay, she said. I have a question now. What is it? Are the bad people gone? I smoothed her hair back from her forehead. Not yet, baby, but we are setting a trap for them. Like for a mouse? Bigger than a mouse, I said. Like for a dragon. She smiled. I can help. I am good at traps. I know you are. I went back to the cabin and set the stage. I printed out the settlement offer Maris Venn had given me. I put it on the table. Then I called Maris. I am ready. I said into the phone. I sounded tired. I sounded beaten. Claire? Maris's voice was smooth, victorious. I am so glad to hear that. You are making the right choice for Lily. I just want it to be over. I said, I want the check, and I want to leave. We can have the papers ready this afternoon. Come to my office. No, I said, Not your office. I can't go into town. People are staring at me. Where then? The rental. Come here. Bring the notary. Bring the check. I will sign everything. That is unorthodox, Maris said. Take it or leave it. Maris, if I have to drive into town. I might drive to the FBI field office instead. There was a pause, a silence that hummed with calculation. We will be there at 4 o'clock, she said. I hung up. I looked at the clock. 3 hours. I set up the laptop in the loft, hidden under a pile of blankets, the camera lens positioned to look down through the railing at the kitchen table. I started the recording software. I placed my phone on the counter, hidden behind a jar of pasta, recording audio. I placed the second burner phone, the one connected to the cloud, in my pocket. I wasn't just going to sign. I was going to make them admit it. I was going to make them comfortable. I was going to let them think they were buying my silence. And in doing so, I was going to make them sell themselves. At 3:50, a black car pulled into the gravel driveway. It wasn't Maris Venn's car. It was the black SUV. I watched from the window. Maris Venn got out of the passenger side, and from the driver's side, adjusting his cufflinks, stepped Cal Donovan. He was coming personally. Good, I whispered. I opened the door. Cal walked up the steps, a smile on his face that was warm, empathetic, and utterly terrifying. Claire, he said, extending a hand. I was so relieved when Maris told me, we just want to help you move forward. I looked at his hand. I looked at the ring with the hawk crest. I took his hand. It was warm. Thank you. Cal, I said, please, come in. They stepped into the trap. The trap I had set in the cabin did not snap shut the way I had intended. I had expected Cal Donovan and Maris Venn to walk in with a check and a confession wrapped in legal jargon, thinking they were buying off a grieving daughter. I had the cameras rolling. I had the audio recording. I was ready to capture their guilt. But Cal Donovan did not become the king of Warren Cove by walking blindly into rooms. He sat at my small, scratched kitchen table, his cashmere coat draped over the back of the chair, looking entirely too large for the space. Maris sat beside him, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the room as if assessing the property value of the dust motes. We are not just here to settle the estate. Claire, Cal said. His voice was a low rumble, warm and terrifyingly sincere. We are here to honor Martin and Elaine. He slid a document across the table. It wasn't the settlement agreement Maris had shown me in her office. It was a glossy brochure. The Butler Memorial Grant. Hearthlight is establishing a permanent fund in their name. Cal continued, to help families in crisis, to ensure that the legacy of your parents is one of generosity, not tragedy. I looked at the brochure. It had a photo of my parents from their 40th anniversary party. They looked happy, oblivious. I don't want a fund. Cal, I want to know why my father's bank account was drained. Maris leaned forward. That brings us to the second matter. She pulled a thicker document from her briefcase. This is the amended family trust, dated 3 years ago. I opened it. My eyes scanned the legalese, looking for the lie, and then I found it. It was a clause on page 4. Beneficiary and co-trustee. Claire Butler. Authorized signatory for transfer of assets. Claire Butler. I stared at the page. My name was there. My signature was there. But I had never signed this. You see, Claire, Cal said softly, you were not just the beneficiary. You were the active steward. According to the records, you authorized the transfer of funds to Candlebridge Holdings as part of a diversification strategy. You and your father did it together. My stomach dropped. The room seemed to tilt. This is a forgery, I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling under the table. I never signed this. Cal smiled. It was a sad, pitying smile. Memory is a funny thing during grief, but the notary log is clear. If you challenge this, if you claim this is fraud, you are implicating yourself. You are the co-trustee. If the money was moved improperly, you moved it. I realized then what they were doing. They weren't just buying my silence. They were welding me to the crime. If I went to the police, if I showed them the spreadsheet, Cal would produce this document. He would paint me as the greedy daughter who helped her father embezzle his own equity, then got cold feet when the house burned down. They were dirtying me. They were making sure that if I spoke, no one would listen to a thief accusing another thief. So, Cal said, clapping his hands together gently, we want to make this right. We want to present you with the first check from the memorial grant at the Hearthlight. Holiday gala tomorrow night. The gala? I asked. Yes, at the yacht club. The whole town will be there. We want to bring you up on stage. We want to show the community that the Butler family is still standing, that we are united. It wasn't an invitation. It was a hostage situation. Come to the stage, smile, accept the check, and validate us. Or we release this document and destroy your life. I looked at the camera lens hidden in the loft, blinking its silent red eye. It was recording. But it didn't matter. It was recording Cal offering me charity. It was recording me looking at a document that proved I was a criminal. I looked at Cal. I will be there. I said, excellent. Cal stood up. He reached out and squeezed my shoulder. His grip was firm, possessive. Wear something festive. Claire, it is a celebration of life. When they left, I collapsed into the chair. I felt physically ill. The sophistication of it was suffocating. They didn't use guns. They used paper. They used my own name against me. I called Janelle. I told her everything. They are trying to isolate you. Janelle said, if you go to that gala, you are endorsing them. You are telling the world that Hearthlight is good. I have to go. I said, if I don't, they will release the trust document. I will lose my credibility. I will lose custody of Lily if I am under investigation for fraud. Then you go, Janelle said. But you don't go alone, and you don't go unprotected. I met Agent Moreno 2 hours later in the parking lot of a grocery store 3 towns over. She sat in my passenger seat, looking at the copy of the forged trust document. This is high quality, she muttered. The signature is a digital lift, but it is seamless. They have someone on the inside at the county clerk's office. Can you prove it is fake? I asked. Eventually. Forensic handwriting analysis takes weeks. You don't have weeks. I told her about the gala. I'm going to wear a wire. I said, I am going to get Cal alone. I am going to make him admit that the signature is fake. No, Moreno said sharply. Absolutely not. Why? I have to get him on tape. Claire, listen to me. Moreno turned in the seat, her face hard. We ran the names from your father's list, the crossed-out ones. 3 of those families didn't just move away. They vanished. No credit card activity, no new addresses. You mean they are dead? I mean they are gone. Moreno paused. If you corner Cal Donovan, if you back him into a wall in public, he won't confess. He will panic. And if he panics, he calls the cleaner. The cleaner? The man who set the timer on your parents' house. I felt the cold seep into the car. If the network is this big, Moreno said, then Cal is just a middle manager. He reports to someone. If you make a scene at the gala, you might spook the people at the top. And if they get spooked, they cut loose ends. My parents, I whispered. If they are alive, Moreno said. If they are being held somewhere to ensure your compliance, then a public confrontation is a death sentence for them. So what do I do? You go to the gala, Moreno said. You smile, you play the part, you gather intelligence. Who is there? Who does Cal talk to? Who are the donors? We need to map the network before we can strike. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, flat device. It looked like a credit card. Put this in your clutch. It is a high-gain omnidirectional microphone. It will stream directly to my team in the van outside. Do not engage, just record. I took the card. It felt light, too light to stop a monster. I returned to the cabin to find Evans sitting on the front steps. He was shivering, his head in his hands. I thought you ran. I said, walking past him. I wanted to. He said. He stood up. He looked younger than I had seen him in years. Vulnerable. I went home. I started packing. But then I found something. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. I was going through my old voicemails. From months ago. I found one from Dad. I stopped. My hand was on the doorknob. Play it. Evan pressed the screen. The audio was grainy, filled with static. It sounded like a pocket dial. There was the rustle of fabric, the sound of a car engine humming, and then my father's voice, low, murmuring, "Leave and never return." No, too angry. "Leave and never return. Leave and never return." He was repeating the phrase, over and over, testing the inflection. "It has to be fast," he muttered to himself. "Has to scare her. Leave and never return." Okay, Martin, you can do this." Then the recording ended. I stared at the phone. Tears pricked my eyes. Hot and sudden. He practiced. Evan whispered. He rehearsed it. He knew he was going to have to do it. "It proves it wasn't a rejection." I said, "It proves it was a plan. He was saving you." "Claire." Evan looked at me. He knew the deadline was coming. He knew he couldn't pay. So he built a lifeboat made of words. I took the phone from Evan. "Send this to me. I am coming with you." Evan said, "To the gala." "No, you can't. I am not letting you walk into that room alone. I am your brother." "Claire." I let them down. "I am not letting you down." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the resolve. The same resolve my father must have had when he sat in his car practicing the line that would break his heart. "Okay," I said, "but you stick to the script. We are grateful. We are humbled. We are defeated." The Warren Cove Yacht Club was a sprawling building of white wood and glass, jutting out into the dark water of the bay. It was decorated with enough lights to guide a plane to landing. I wore a black dress, severe and simple. I carried a silver clutch with Agent Moreno's microphone inside. Evan walked beside me, wearing a suit that was slightly too large for him now that the stress had eaten away his weight. The moment we walked in, the noise of the party dipped, heads turned. I felt the weight of 100 gazes. Cal Donovan materialized from the crowd. He was wearing a tuxedo with a velvet lapel. He looked like a prince. "Claire, Evan," he opened his arms. "I am so glad you came." He ushered us into the room. It was warm, smelling of pine and expensive catering. A string quartet was playing Silent Night in the corner. People came up to us. People I had known my whole life. "So brave of you to come. Your parents were saints. Hearthlight is doing such good work." I smiled until my face hurt. I nodded. I accepted their condolences, knowing that half of them probably had deeds owned by Candlebridge. I moved through the room, the microphone in my clutch catching every word. I looked for the details Moreno had asked for. I saw the crest everywhere. It wasn't just on Cal's ring. It was on the wax seals of the donation envelopes on every table. It was embroidered in silver thread on the napkins. It was on the lanyards of the security staff standing by the doors, the hawk gripping the key. This wasn't a charity. It was a feudal system. The crest marked what they owned. I noticed something else. The staff, the waiters, the bartenders, the security. They weren't locals. I didn't recognize any of them. They moved with a military precision. They weren't high school kids working a holiday shift. They were pros. Cal steered me toward the bar. "I want you to meet someone," he said. He introduced me to a man named Mr. Vane. He was older, with skin like parchment and eyes that didn't blink often enough. "Mr. Vane is a major donor to the fund," Cal said. "He flew in from the capital just for tonight." "Mr." Vane took my hand. His skin was dry and cold. "Your father was a stubborn man." "Miss Butler," Vane said. His voice was like grinding stones. "Admirable. But stubbornness has a cost." I felt a chill go down my spine. This was the threat, veiled in a compliment, delivered in a tuxedo. "We are just grateful for the support," I recited, staring at his tie. It was a red tie, and pinned to it was a small gold lapel pin, the hawk. I realized then that Moreno was right. Cal was the face, but Vane was the architecture. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text. I excused myself. Stepping away from Vane and Cal, moving toward the ladies' room, I pulled out my phone. It was a message from Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor watching Lily. Lily found a card in her backpack, said her grandma hid it there before Christmas. "She says you need to see it. It has a number on it." I typed back. What number? MC402. And it says Marina. MC402. That wasn't a phone number. It was a locker number. The Marina Club lockers. My mother had hidden a card in Lily's bag. She must have done it when she hugged Lily goodbye. Or when she took her coat. A failsafe. I looked at the time. 8:30. The Marina Club was next door to the Yacht Club, connected by a walkway. I had to go. Now, I found Evan near the shrimp cocktail tower. Create a distraction. I whispered, "What?" "I need 10 minutes. Spill a drink. Start a toast. Anything. Just keep Cal's eyes off the side door." Evan didn't ask questions. He nodded. I slipped through the crowd. I saw Evan walk up to Cal and clap him on the shoulder, laughing too loudly, drawing the room's attention. I ducked out the side exit. The cold hit me like a hammer. The wind was whipping off the water, biting through my thin dress. I shivered, hugging my arms to my chest. I ran along the wooden walkway. The music from the party faded, replaced by the slapping of waves against the pylons and the creaking of the floating docks. The Marina Club was dark, closed for the season, but the outdoor locker bay, where members kept their gear, was accessible. I scanned the numbers. 300, 350, 400, 402. It was a small, metal locker. It was padlocked. I didn't have a combination. I pulled on the lock. It held fast. Think, Claire. Think like Mom. The combination would be something simple, something Lily would know, in case she was the one opening it. I tried Lily's birthday. It didn't work. I tried the house number. No. Then I remembered the note in the ornament. Pay the heating bill. My mother was practical. I tried the date of the fire. December 24th. The lock clicked open. I pulled the door open. The locker was empty except for a small, plastic bag taped to the back wall. I ripped the bag open. Inside was a cheap flip phone. A burner. It was turned off. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up with a harsh blue glow. The battery was at 10%. There were no contacts saved, no recent calls. I went to the drafts folder. There was one message, saved on December 24th at 4:15 p.m. If you are reading this, we didn't make it back in time. Do not trust the police. Do not trust the bank. The evidence is not in the house. It is in the cloud. Password is Lily's middle name plus the year we bought the cottage. I stared at the screen. They had backed it up. The real evidence. The raw files. But there was something else. The phone vibrated in my hand. I nearly dropped it. It was ringing. Unknown number. How? No one had this number. This phone had been in a locker for days. Unless the person calling was the person who gave them the phone, or the person waiting for them to pick it up. I stared at the ringing phone. The sound was swallowed by the wind. I pressed answer. I put the phone to my ear. I didn't speak. There was silence on the other end. Static. And breathing. Shallow. Ragged breathing. "Hello?" I whispered. There was a pause. A hesitation that lasted a lifetime. "Claire?" The voice was weak. Cracked. But I knew it. I knew it in my bones. "Mom?" I choked out. "Mom, is that you?" There was a sob on the other end. A sound of pure, terrified relief. "Claire, listen to me," she whispered. Her voice was hurried, desperate. "Where are you?" I screamed into the wind. "Mom, where are you? I don't know. It is dark. It smells like salt. Mom, the house. I thought you were dead. We got out," she said. "But they were waiting. They took us. Claire, they want the password. They want the cloud files. I have the phone." I said, "I have the draft. Destroy it," she hissed. "Destroy it and run." "No. I am coming for you. Tell me what you see." "Claire, stop." Her voice sharpened. "You cannot come for us. It is too big. Cal is not the one. Who is it? Who has you?" She took a breath. I heard a metal door creak in the background. I heard heavy footsteps. "Someone is coming." She whispered, "Claire, do not come home. Do not come looking. Take Lily and run. Mom, I love you. Leave and never return." The line went dead. I stood there on the freezing dock, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. They were alive. They were being held. Smells like salt. I looked around the marina, the dark water, the rows of shrink-wrapped boats. Smells like salt. They weren't in a basement. They weren't in a warehouse inland. They were here, or close. I looked back at the yacht club. The lights were blazing. The music was drifting out over the water. Silent night. Cal Donovan was in there, drinking champagne, smiling at my brother, and somewhere nearby, my parents were terrified in the dark. I looked at the phone in my hand. Destroy it and run. That was her command. I tightened my grip on the phone until the plastic creaked. I was done with commands. I put the phone in my pocket. I wiped the tears from my face. I smoothed my dress. I wasn't running. I walked back toward the yacht club. I wasn't going to destroy the evidence. I was going to use it. I walked back into the party. I found Agent Moreno's microphone in my clutch. I turned the gain up. I walked straight toward Cal Donovan. He was laughing at something, Mr. Vane said. He saw me approaching. He smiled. Claire, there you are. We were just about to start the presentation. I stepped into his personal space. I smiled back. It was a smile made of razor blades. I am ready. Cal, I said. My voice was loud enough for Mr. Vane to hear, loud enough for the microphone. I am ready to accept the legacy. Cal's eyes flickered. He saw something in my face that he hadn't seen before. He saw the daughter who had stopped grieving and started hunting. Wonderful, he said slowly. He offered me his arm. I took it. We walked toward the stage together. I was walking him to the gallows, and this time, I wasn't going to let him step off the drop. The applause at the Hearthlight Gala was a physical weight, pressing against my eardrums, muffling the chaotic thumping of my own heart. I stood on the stage, the bright spotlights blinding me, holding a giant check made of foam core that promised $50,000 to the Butler Memorial Fund. Next to me, Cal Donovan was smiling that perfect politician smile, his hand resting warmly on my shoulder. To the audience, it looked like comfort. To me, it felt like a shackle. I smiled back. I played the part. I accepted the microphone and spoke words that tasted like ash. I thanked the community. I thanked Cal. I thanked the people who had murdered my parents' reputation and, as far as I knew, were holding their bodies hostage in a room that smelled of salt. But inside my silver clutch, the tiny microphone Agent Moreno had given me was humming, and inside my pocket, the burner phone I had retrieved from the marina locker felt hot against my hip. As we walked off stage, Cal leaned in close. You did perfectly, Claire, he murmured. Your parents would be proud of that performance. I stopped. We were in the wings now, hidden by the heavy velvet curtains. I turned to look at him. They are alive. Cal, I said. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat. Dead eyes, shark eyes. I don't know what you mean, he said. I found the phone. I whispered. I found the locker. I know they are listening, and I know you need the cloud password to get into the files they hid. Cal went very still. The sounds of the party, the clinking glasses, the string quartet, seemed to fade away. You are playing a dangerous game. Claire, I am not playing. I said, I am negotiating. You want the files? You want the evidence destroyed? Bring them to me. Tonight, Cal said. His voice was no longer warm. It was efficient, cold. Tonight, I agreed. The North Point shoreline, the old cannery road. 1 hour. I walked away before he could answer. I didn't run. I walked with the steady, clicking rhythm of my heels on the hardwood, straight out the front door, past the valet, and into the freezing night. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition on the first try. My phone buzzed. It was Moreno. We heard everything. We are moving units to North Point. Do not go alone. I typed back. I have to be the bait. If he sees a tail, he kills them. We will be invisible. Moreno replied. But Claire, if this goes south, you get on the ground. I drove to the rental cabin first. I had to move Lily. I couldn't leave her with Mrs. Higgins. Not now. If Cal felt cornered, he wouldn't just come for me. He would come for the things I loved. Janelle was already there, pacing the small living room. She looked at my face and stopped pacing. "It is happening," she said. "Take Lily." I said, "Take her to your sister's in Vermont. Drive through the night. Do not stop for gas until you are across the state line." "Mom?" Lily appeared from the loft. Dragging her stuffed rabbit, I knelt down. I didn't hug her. If I hugged her, I would break, and I needed to be made of stone right now. "You are going on a road trip with Auntie Janelle." I said, "You have to be my brave girl. Remember the feelings rule?" "Yes, I am scared right now." I said, "But I am doing something important. I need you to be safe so I can do my job. Can you do that for me?" Lily nodded. Her eyes were huge. "Will you bring Grandma and Grandpa back?" I kissed her forehead. "I am going to try." I watched Janelle's taillights fade into the darkness. The silence they left behind was absolute. I was alone. I drove to North Point. It was a desolate stretch of coast, miles away from the manicured lawns of the yacht club. Here, the ocean wasn't a scenic backdrop. It was a violent force. The waves crashed against the jagged black rocks, throwing up sprays of freezing mist. The fog was thick, rolling in off the water like a white wall, obscuring the moon. I parked my car near the ruins of the old cannery. I left the headlights on, cutting 2 yellow cones through the mist. I waited. I checked the burner phone. 10% battery. Just enough. I checked the microphone in my clutch. I pinned it to the lapel of my coat, hoping the wind wouldn't drown out the audio. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The cold was seeping into my bones. I started to doubt. Had he called my bluff? Was he sending a hitman instead of a negotiator? Was I standing here waiting to die while my parents rotted in a cell? Then, twin lights appeared in the fog. A vehicle approached slowly, the gravel crunching under its tires. It was a black SUV. It stopped 50 feet away. The engine cut. The light stayed on. For a long moment, nothing happened. We were 2 islands of light in a sea of darkness. Then the driver's door opened. Cal Donovan stepped out. He wasn't wearing his tuxedo anymore. He was wearing a heavy wool coat and boots. He looked casual. He looked like a man coming to inspect a property line. He walked toward me, his hands in his pockets. He stopped 10 feet away, just at the edge of my headlight's reach. "It is a nasty night for a meeting." "Claire," he said. "Where are they?" I asked. Cal sighed. A cloud of white breath escaped his lips. "You are very persistent. It is a trait you get from your father. Martin always had to triple-check the measurements. He couldn't just trust the blueprint. Stop talking about him like he is dead." I said, "I know you have them. I spoke to my mother." "I know." Cal said, "We monitor the lines. Claire, we let that call go through. We thought it might discourage you." "Discourage me?" I laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "You let me hear my mother's voice and you thought I would walk away? Most people do." Cal said, he sounded genuinely confused. "Most people, when faced with the reality of their own destruction, choose survival. We gave you an out. Claire, the money, the gala, the reputation. You could have taken the check and gone back to your life. You could have been the tragic heroine and let you keep stealing houses. We don't steal," Cal said softly. "We manage." "Manage?" I stared at him. "You blow up homes. You forge deeds. You ruin lives. We save the town." Cal's voice rose. "Just a fraction." It was the first crack in his composure. "Do you have any idea how fragile a place like Warren Cove is? It relies on image. It relies on stability. When people get messy, when they default on loans, when they let their properties rot, when they get addicted or divorced or senile, they drag the whole community down. We step in. We quietly remove the blight. We ensure the property values hold. We keep the ecosystem healthy." "You are a gardener," I said, realizing the depth of his delusion. "You think you are weeding the garden? I am the caretaker." "Claire, and sometimes, caretaking requires hard choices. Like kidnapping my parents?" Your father was going to expose the network, Cal said, shaking his head as if disappointed. He had the data. He was going to hand it to the feds. Do you know what a federal investigation does to a town? It freezes everything. Property values plummet. Investments dry up. The marina expansion, the new school, all of it would have died. Martin was going to burn down the village to save his own conscience. We couldn't let him do that. So you blew up the house. We needed a distraction. Cal admitted, we needed him gone. But we couldn't just shoot him. That is messy. An explosion. A gas leak. That is a tragedy. People rally around a tragedy. It brings the town together. He took a step closer. But we didn't kill them. Claire, we aren't butchers. We just needed to hold them until the transfer was finalized, until the heat died down. We were going to let them go. Eventually. Relocated. Of course. Relocated. I repeated. Like the other families on the list? The ones who vanished? They are happy, Cal said. They have new lives. Smaller lives. Lives they can manage. He reached into his coat pocket. I tensed. Ready to run. But he pulled out a folder. Here's the deal. Claire, this is an affidavit. It states that you have reviewed the evidence and accept the findings of the fire marshal. It states that you consent to the sealing of the family trust. Sign it. Give me the password to the cloud files. And I walk away. And my parents? I will make a call. They will be dropped off at a hospital in the next county, alive. I looked at the folder. I looked at Cal's face. He looked reasonable. He looked like a man offering me a lifeline. That is the terrifying thing about monsters. They don't look like monsters. They look like the guy who coaches Little League. I need to see them. I said. Cal frowned. That wasn't the agreement. I don't care. I am not giving you the password until I see them. Cal stared at me. He looked at the fog swirling around us. He looked at my car. He pulled a radio from his pocket. Bring them up, he said. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited. A second set of lights appeared in the fog. Coming from the access road behind Cal, a van, a white, nondescript cargo van. It pulled up next to Cal's SUV. The side door slid open. 2 men in dark clothes stepped out, and between them, supporting each other, were 2 figures, Mom, Dad. They looked small. That was the first thing I noticed. My father, who had always seemed like a giant to me, was hunched over. His clothes were dirty. He had a bandage wrapped around his head. My mother was shivering, wrapped in a thin gray blanket. Mom! I screamed. I took a step forward. Stay back, Cal barked. One of the men raised a handgun. I froze. Claire? My mother's voice was weak, carried away by the wind. Claire, go! Martin looked up. His eyes were swollen. He looked at me, and I saw the same look he had given me at the dinner table. The calculation. The fear. Don't give it to him. Claire, he croaked. Don't give him the password. He won't let us go. Quiet, Martin, Cal said pleasantly. He turned to me. You see? They are alive. Now, the password. I looked at my parents. I looked at Cal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. The password. I said, my voice shaking. I paused. Cal leaned in. Yes? The password is, you are surrounded. Cal blinked. What? Now? I screamed. The fog exploded with light. Floodlights from the cannery roof, which I hadn't even seen, slammed on, blinding us all in a wash of brilliant white. Federal agent! Drop the weapon! The voice boomed from a loudspeaker. Figures in tactical gear swarmed from the rocks, moving like shadows made solid. The man holding my parents hesitated. He raised his gun toward me. A single shot rang out. Sharp. Precise. The man dropped the gun and clutched his shoulder. Screaming, Cal spun around, his face a mask of shock. He looked for an escape, but Moreno was there, stepping out of the mist with her weapon drawn, leveled at his chest. Cal Donovan, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and kidnapping. Get on your knees! Cal didn't move. He stared at me. The reasonable mask was gone. In its place was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. You stupid girl, he hissed. You broke the town. Get on your knees, Moreno shouted. Cal slowly sank to the wet gravel. I didn't watch him. I ran. I ran past the guns, past the shouting, past the chaos. Mom! Dad! I crashed into them. My father caught me, his arms weak but holding on with a desperate strength. My mother buried her face in my neck, sobbing. We were a tangle of cold limbs and wet clothes and shaking bodies. I got you, I whispered. I got you. We stood there, clinging to each other. While the FBI cuffed Cal and the other men, "It's over," my father said. His voice was thick with tears. "It's finally over." I looked up. I looked past the flashing lights of the tactical vehicles, and I saw it, on the access road, far back in the fog. Beyond the police blockade, another car, a long black sedan. It sat there for a second, watching. I saw the silhouette of a person in the back seat, a profile I recognized from the party. Mr. Vane. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. He was just observing. Then, the car slowly reversed. It turned around without haste and disappeared into the night. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. Agent Moreno walked up to us. She looked exhausted but triumphant. We got the drive from the cloud. She said, "It is all there, the deeds, the transfers, the emails. We have Cal dead to rights." I pointed at the road. There was another car. I said, "Vane, the man from the party. He was watching." Moreno looked back at the empty road. She frowned. "We will put out a bolo," she said. "But Cal is the one who signed the checks. Claire, Cal is the one who ran the operation here. We cut off the head." I looked at Cal, who was being shoved into the back of a squad car. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the ground, defeated. But I remembered the crest, the hawk holding the key. Cal wasn't the head. Cal was the hand. We went to the hospital. My parents were treated for dehydration and exposure. There were police guards at the door. Lily was brought back from Vermont the next morning. The reunion was quiet. There were no cheers. Just long hugs and the sound of Lily crying softly into my mother's shoulder. We stayed in a safe house for a month while the investigation tore Warren Cove apart. The news broke the story wide open. The charity scam. The real estate ring. Cal's face was on every screen. The Hearthlight Fund was frozen. Maris Venn was disbarred and indicted. It looked like a victory, but 3 months later, when the dust settled, I sat in a new apartment in a city 3 states away. I was reading the final report Janelle had sent me. Cal had pleaded guilty. He took a plea deal, 20 years. He never mentioned Mr. Vane. He never mentioned the regional network. He took the fall for everything, claiming it was his idea, his greed. And Candlebridge Holdings? It dissolved. Its assets were liquidated. But on the last page of the report, there was a small note about the purchasing entity that had bought up the remnants of the Candlebridge portfolio. Phoenix Capital Group. I looked up the registration for Phoenix Capital. It was a shell company, registered in the Caymans. The logo was a stylized sun, but if you looked closely at the rays of the sun, they formed the shape of a bird's wing. A hawk. I closed the laptop. My father walked into the room. He was walking with a cane now, and he jumped at loud noises. But he was alive. He was making tea. "Claire?" he asked. "You okay?" I looked at him. I looked at the peace we had fought for. It was real. We were safe. We were together. But the machine was still out there. It had shed a limb to save the body. It had let us win the battle so it could win the war somewhere else. In some other town. To some other family who thought their neighbors were their friends. "I am okay. Dad," I said. I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had burned away in the fire on Elm Street. My mother had told me to leave and never return. I had left, but I knew, deep down, that I hadn't returned yet. Not really, because the story wasn't over. I touched the glass of the window. "I will find you," I whispered to the invisible hawk. "And next time, I won't just burn the nest, I will catch the bird." Thank you so much for listening to Leave and Never Return. This story was a journey into the terrifying idea that the people smiling at you might be the ones holding the match. I would love to know, where are you listening from right now? Are you safe in your living room? Or are you on a late-night drive checking your rearview mirror? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story and want more tales of betrayal, resilience, and the dark side of human nature, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts on Claire's choice. Would you have run, or would you have fought? Stay safe, and watch out for the hawks.